It sounds like I can hear myself, so I hope that's a good sign. All right, yeah, it sounds like you already have realized that when you're sitting in the front row with guys speaking, you're going to be called on. So I just hope I hope you're ready for it. Because as it says in his bio, this guy is not so much a teacher as much as he's an entertainer. Because he makes government contracting entertaining, and that's not an easy thing to do. So I'm actually looking forward to being in the audience with you to hear all about the simplified acquisition process. And I know it's a mouthful, and for those of you who haven't experienced simplified acquisition, number one, Guy is one of the foremost experts in the US on this topic. So you're getting it from the horse's mouth, from Mount Olympus, whatever you want to say. It is the best information on this topic you're going to receive, and even better, he makes it actionable and pragmatic. So for those of you who aren't familiar with simplified acquisition, it's one of the best ways for a new government contracting company to get into the game, and we're going to learn all about it. So Guy, with that setting, look forward to hearing about all of this.
Appreciate it. Jeff, thanks very much. Thanks a lot. All right. So how's everyone doing today? Excellent, fantastic. Well, my name is Guy Timberlake. I am the co-founder and chief visionary officer of the American Small Business Coalition, and we are a 14-year-old membership organization started by my wife and I. I was the boss up until about seven years ago. My daughter was born. She's now the CEO, and she's very efficient at telling me what to do. So it's okay. I don't mind working for women. No, it works out pretty well and keeps the home very happy. But let me ask a question of all of you, and this is, I consider my activities pretty interactive. I like to get folks involved, and so one of the first things I'd like to learn is who in here is currently in a business that is doing work with the U.S. government? Okay. I'm sorry? Well, either one, but you know, local, okay, perfectly. So, all right, local, good. So how many of you have ever heard the term simplified acquisitions before? Okay. And how many of you that are not currently working with the federal government are here because you're trying to find a way in? Okay, perfect. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this, and I like to give a lot of information in my sessions. And so one, the slides are going to be made available to you, so you will get these, and there's a lot of information in there. Two, I'll give you my card. I am around a lot. I speak at a lot of activities. I was telling Jeff, I literally just flew back in from Anchorage, Alaska. My arms are killing me. And it was a great trip. I spoke at a village conference out there for about 8 of the regional and village corporations out there. 2 weeks before that, I was in Kansas City speaking at the Department of Energy Small Business Conference. And then the month of August for me is going to be horrendous because the first week of August, I'll be in Billings, Montana, speaking to 2 tribes out there. Second week, I'll be in Des Moines speaking at a PTAC event there. Come home for 2 weeks, and then I go back to Oklahoma City and speak at the Indian Country Business Summit. So I was telling Jeff, I actually get more miles now than when I actually sold to the government, having customers all over the world. So, but it's you know, I enjoy it. My family gets to travel with me every once in a while. My daughter will get to go to the Iowa State Fair this year. For the first time. She's already been to Alaska, so we're getting her miles in early too. But so let me tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to give you some information, and I'm going to talk to you about the different things that we do within the American Small Business Coalition, specifically as it relates to simplified acquisitions. And again, I'm going to give you a lot of information about what a simplified acquisition is. And I speak about it not only from the standpoint of being a practitioner, someone that actually has done this. I've been in the business since before simplified acquisitions existed, first of all, and I'll show you a little bit about that. And I did some of the very first ones in the government when they first passed the legislation that created the law that resulted in this happening. I'm also going to show you very specifically a lot of information, 15 reasons very specifically that a company that you own or work for that is doing business with the U.S. government would want to look at these. And it's not just for new companies. I'll say that. It's great for new companies because it's got a lower level, lower burden of entry, as it were. But I have a lot of companies who have been in business for 10, 15, 20 years who are just now realizing what the opportunity is. And let's say it this way, and I think Jeff will agree with this and Charles will too. The cost of doing business as a federal contractor is doing this. It is going up. It is more expensive every day to do business because of competition, because of the market entrance, the diversification of government agencies, and how they buy, leveraging a lot of contract vehicles, for example. There's an investment you have to make in some instances. Also, policy and legislation. There are rules that are changing that are making it more expensive. Cybersecurity, identity management, all these different things all play factors in it. So one of the things that I always look for, my area of expertise is in the area of business development and capture management, with a little bit of marketing in there. Stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I think I know marketing now too. But the whole point is, the way that I teach companies, the way that I mentor companies in the federal sector, is to do these things in a very efficient and effective way so that they can streamline their cost, streamline the time frame it takes to go from identifying opportunities, customers, suspects, things like that, to actually winning them. So efficiency is the key. If I can do something more efficient than you, especially in a competitive situation, well, one, I'll probably win, and two, I'll make more money than you. So efficiency, having processes in place is very much a key to this. So very simply put, I mentioned, I started in the business in 1988. A lot of the folks that know me, they understand I'm old. I tell everyone else I started when I was 4, and I usually get away with it. But I was in the intelligence community. I supported the National Security Agency in my first 6 years in this business, and it took me over a year to figure out who I was working for, because everyone at the company had clearances except me at the time, because I was the new guy. So I was still getting vetted, going through the SF-86 and all these types of things. But we were making these products, from scratch. I mean, sheet metal fabrication, wiring diagrams, things like that. And we were building these boxes, and this was a long time ago, so technology was a lot bigger back then. And they were being used for agencies and special operations to do secure communications, secure data collection and information acquisition. I was directly supporting the intelligence mission. So when I came into business, Bernard Shaw was in the Baghdad Hilton, watching shots being fired over his head, because we were in Desert Shield and getting ready to transition to Desert Storm. So that's how long ago I came into this, and I have an appreciation for everyone like that, and folks like Jeff, who did service for our country. And Jeff, I always say, man, thank you for your service. It is a tremendous honor for me to have supported folks like him, who I never had to get shot at. I also didn't have to go to boot camp. But I got a chance to support, these men and women. It's interesting for me to find out over 30 years exactly what makes, in some cases, a nation run from that perspective. And so what I'm going to talk about today, very simply put, is this. If your company is new to business at all, and especially to federal contracting, then you're going to get some good information out of this. If you were already established in the federal sector, let's say you got a little traction at one agency, you want to maybe add some new product lines or look at increasing your footprint in another agency, you're going to get good information out of this. Now, the problem is, for a lot of companies, whether you're new or experienced, the challenge is this. You're going to run into 2 obstacles. Now, it's not necessarily these guys, but you're going to run into 2 obstacles that are going to prevent you from easily achieving the success you're looking for. And those 2 obstacles are going to cost you time and money, hands down. Again, that's why I look at efficiency. I'm looking for ways to help you do this in a way that will save you that time and money. So, that time and money, where you're going to spend it all? Making decisions. You're going to spend a lot of time trying to make good decisions, and the challenge is that you're going to be hamstrung from doing it primarily because you don't have any information. You're not going to have the information you need to be able to make good decisions. There is a plethora of information available that the government produces on a regular basis that is available completely for free. You do not have to pay for it, buy it from anyone, lease it from anyone, anything. And it is the kind of information that if you understand what it is, which is the second issue, if you understand what that information is and what it means to you, it will give you the keys to the kingdom of being able to prosecute business opportunities with various agencies, civilian defense or intelligence. And so, again, the challenge is having the information and knowing how to use that information so that your company can make decisions. So my goal, in short order, is to give you information. I'm going to give you information. We're starting right now. I'm going to tell you what that information means. I'll tell you where you can get the information. Only thing I can't do is show you exactly how to cultivate it. That's because we just don't have time, and I don't have the system up to do it, but that's also one of the things that we teach, is companies how to use the various tools that are available out there. So by giving you this information, my goal is to make you all as competitive as possible, so that as you go forward looking at government agencies, you're doing it from the most informed position you can, so that you're able to make good decisions that save you time and money, grow jobs for your company, grow revenues, grow profits. All right? So, here's a little bit about me very quickly. I mentioned that when I got my start in the business, I was supporting, and this was back in 1988, I was supporting this organization, the U.S. intelligence community as a whole. I was assigned to one specific agency. We worked with multiple all the time through interagency activities. So I've touched pretty much every agency up there at one time or another over the time I've been involved in federal contracting. It's a very interesting space to be in. All right, I'd love to tell you about it, but I'd have to kill you though, so we can't have that. So one of the things we talk about is this. Very specifically, back in 1988, when I got started, there was a lot going on back then. Some of the music of the day, some of us might remember, because I think everyone else in here is younger than me. George Michael had Faith, one of the #1 hits that year. Whitney Houston, So Emotional. George Harrison, Got My Mind Set on You. Michael Jackson had The Way You Make Me Feel. Anybody having flashbacks besides me? Okay. So there was also a little marketing campaign that was started by this little sneaker company that is somewhat gone viral ever since then. Remember Just Do It? All right, that's when it started, 1988. All right, so that's how long this has been. So now let's fast forward just a bit, and then I'm going to bring you up to modern time, well, more modern time, still years ago. 1994, it's a very important year for this conversation. In 1994, we had a bunch of TV shows that were on at the time. We had ER, Seinfeld, Grace Under Fire, NYPD Blue. Those were all the top-rated shows of the day. There were a couple movies in the box office, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction. These were brand new. They were killing it at the box office. All right. At the time, one of the newest, actually, before I get to him, there was a little incident with an ASP, those police batons, all right? A couple figure skaters had a tiff. Remember that? Tanya Harding, okay, Nancy Kerrigan. That was 1994. Ken Griffey Jr., one of the latest entries into the Baseball Hall of Fame, was on the cover of the magazines for a very different reason. 1994 is the year we didn't have any baseball. Remember that, the strike. Okay, and so kind of setting the stage for you, let you understand what's going on. This was also the year that a vice president by the last name of Gore did his famous flipping the switch. Everybody remember what he turned on? The internet. 1994 is when it basically became a real reality for a lot of us in the business world. My first 6 years in business, we didn't have internet at the desktop. All right, we didn't have FedBizOps. All right, we had Commerce Business Daily. All right, delivered by snail mail or, of course, a fax machine. Remember those? All right, that's how we were getting our information. That's how much things have changed since then. 1994 was also the year that legislation was passed called the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act. The Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act added a number of rules to federal contracting. There's the commercial items purchasing, FAR 12, streamlined acquisitions, and then there was FAR Part 13, the Simplified Acquisitions Procedures, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, one of the reasons that I am such a big advocate for simplified acquisitions is I did them. Again, from the day they started, I was involved in doing these. As a matter of fact, my very first $1 million contract was supporting the U.S. Navy building electronic classrooms for the F-18 back in 1994, when it was still a fairly new fighter. You know how I got that $1 million deal? I did 6 months of micro purchases and simplified acquisitions deals with a customer out of Naval Undersea Warfare Center, Keyport, Washington, gaining their trust, shipping out toner cartridges and memory cards and laptops and printers and things like that. And they got to, well, there's 3 things that happened. They got to know me, they got to like me, and they got to trust me. And then one day, this big order came through. You know, they said, hey, Guy, can you give us a price for this requirement? And I started going through it, and right about $500,000, I'm kind of like, you guys never buy anything this big. Where are you going to get the money from? Oh, don't ever say it to a customer, okay? I'm working with an old retired sailor. He's a salty dog, all right? Ernie Taggart, great guy. Took me under his wing back then. And he basically said, young man, you don't worry about my money. You just give me some pricing if you want this deal. Yes, sir. All right. So I got the pricing back over to him. 2 days later, I get another fax back across, 12, 13 pages long. My first program deal, $1 million, building the electronic classrooms at 3 locations for the U.S. Navy. So I was excited. So part of the moral of the story is these simplified acquisitions, which a lot of companies and a lot of folks like me, we kind of turn our nose up at these things. They're too small. Okay, well, you'll see how small they are not shortly. But we don't look at them because they don't fit the normal mold of the billion-dollar mega contracts, things like that. So we don't feel like putting the skin in the game to invest in those, but this is where the relationships start. This is how you get your foot in the door, at least one of the ways. So I have a website that I'd love for you all to visit sometime. It's not my corporate website, it's another one. It's called the GovCon Channel, GovCon channel.com. GovCon Channel is a news website. We curate news from a lot of great sources. We publish our own articles, things of that nature. One of the articles I wrote is, the name of the rule is FASA, and I love having plays on words. So I talked about low-hanging fruit are a fascinating opportunity. So it'll give you a lot of good information about the rule, about how the government uses simplified acquisitions, and I think you'll come away with a lot of very good information about what this is all about. So, title of this program is 15 Reasons Small Business Should Have Simplified Acquisitions in Their Pipeline. I'm doing my Dave Letterman countdown right now. I'm going to give you guys some information, kind of a blow-by-blow. Feel free to stop me and ask questions anytime you like. All right, so first one is this. Reason number 15. Simplified acquisitions were made to streamline purchasing. What does that mean, streamlining purchasing? Sounds like easier, make it go faster to me. Have you guys ever heard the term contingency contracting? I know Jeff has. Contingency contracting is effectively, especially for the military, when they have a forward operating base or elements deployed into territory that's not necessarily ours or friendly. There are actually contracting officers who go to war because they got to buy stuff. They have to do procurement in the field. So if they need some new weapons, foodstuffs, whatever it is, they're doing buys in the field. They're calling up KBR, Halliburton, or whoever the contractor is in the area doing this stuff. Well, contingency contracting, the best way to describe it is contracting with all the fluff moved out of it. This is like get it done contracting. That's what simplified acquisitions is. FAR Part 13 is effectively contracting based on traditional contracting, and I'll show you in a minute, with a lot of the junk removed to make it streamlined. So, when you think about federal contracting, when you think about how the U.S. government buys, there are 4 primary parts of the FAR that come into play. Now, I know you guys probably can't see it that well, but again, you'll be getting all these slides too. Those 4 parts of the FAR start with the one that is the most well-known, not by the FAR reference, but by the name of the type of contract. Everyone's heard of a GSA schedule, right? All right, so a GSA schedule is actually kind of a fallacy. All right, there is such a thing, but it's actually, the program is called the Federal Supply Schedule Program. And there's actually 2 schedules. There's the GSA schedule and the VA schedule. The VA schedule is all medical. Medical people, medical products, medical solutions, medical services, all those types of things. So if you go to VA, they have their own FSS, and they manage it just like GSA manages theirs. So that is called FAR Subpart 8.4. You don't need to remember that. Okay, that is the most well-known common part of the FAR when it comes to contracting. That's what people most know about in and out of government contracting. Now, it doesn't account for a lot of the money, however. In the scheme of things, both parts of the Federal Supply Schedule program combined account for right around 10% of the overall fiscal spend. So that's all the different types of GSA schedules and all the types of VA schedules. You know, the government spent $472 billion last year. All right, reported spending in their procurement system. So basically 10% of that went to the schedules. So that means there's a lot of money being spent other ways that are not tied to the schedules. So the type of contracting that accounts for the most dollars is what's known as contracting by negotiation. That's FAR Part 15. That is where the bulk of the dollars go every year. And again, that is heavily, you know, it's heavy. It's a lot of rules involved. It's meticulous, takes a lot of time to get things done. Contracting under the schedules is much simpler and much quicker than it is doing FAR Part 15 buying. But again, they only use it about 10% of the time, dollar-wise. Now, the one you see up here in the middle, the one I'm going to talk about in just one second, is actually a blend of the GSA schedule contracting and the FAR Part 15 contracting. There's one other one that you can't see, it's at the bottom. It's called FAR Part 36. That's where you get a lot of the architecture, engineering, design stuff going on, AED. That's where a lot of the construction, the builders, whenever they're putting up a new federal building or things like that, that's where that typically occurs. So FAR Part 36 is really focused on construction-related services. Now, the one in the middle that's got the check mark, that's FAR Part 13. That's the target of our discussion. It is as simple and more simple than the Federal Supply Schedule program and less restrictive, and I'll show you that in a minute. But it's based on the same rules minus about 6 major FAR clauses as FAR Part 15. They literally went in there and went into FAR Part 15, ripped out a bunch of its guts and said, gone with you. We're going to make it easier. And here's what happened. Years ago, they had some contracting officers that they talked to. This young lady right here was a contracting officer at Department of Labor. You know, this young lady was a contracting officer at Department of Defense. They said, please go out for us right now and do a purchase for $1,000. Now go do it for $10,000. Then do it for $50,000 and then $1 million. Guess what they found out? Based on the rules in play at the time, the burden associated with buying something at $1,000 or $5,000 was the same as doing it at $1 million. So they created some programs to simplify things. The first thing they did was they created micro purchases. Micro purchase program is currently anything under $3,500 is purchased by a SmartPay card. That's one of the 3 credit cards. It's actually a purchase card used by the U.S. government. And there are 298,000 of these in circulation. Most of the people that carry them are not buyers. They're not contracting or acquisition staff. They're program managers, clerical, directors, everything but acquisition. And the U.S. government spends probably about $15 billion a year. That way, it doesn't get recorded in FPDS. There's no paperwork. It's literally, you'll get a call one day that says, ma'am, I'd like to buy 3 hours of your support to do a gap analysis. I'd like to buy 50 toner cartridges. Or they'll walk into Best Buy and go buy stuff, and all of a sudden Best Buy's a government contractor and has no idea because they got paid by the U.S. government. So that's one of the ways. The second thing they did is for the people that were actually buyers, they created the simplified acquisition procedures, and that's the next level up. There is paperwork, there are contracts in place, and what they effectively did is they said that a simplified acquisition is described in the FAR as the acquisition of supplies and services, including construction, research and development, and commercial items when they don't exceed the simplified acquisition threshold. Now, trust me, I want to tell you all about the threshold in a second, too, so you know what that is. But basically, those are the rules. Now, one thing I'll show you is this. I made a comment earlier that simplified acquisitions are less restrictive than GSA schedule, VA schedule buying. Here's why. If you look at the rules for the schedules compared to the rules for simplified acquisitions, it looks like this. Schedules can only be used for commercial items. You cannot have research and development. You cannot have construction on the schedule because of the Brooks Act. So there are limitations on what you can buy on a schedule. The other part is simplified acquisitions, for the most part, are not contract vehicles. It's not a CLIN, a line item. In a lot of cases, the government says, I got a list of stuff I need to buy, give me a quote, and they just make an ad hoc contract, purchase order, something like that, say, here you go. So you don't have to have the investment, a lot of times, of a established contract vehicle to go after a lot of simplified acquisitions. So we'll talk more about that too. Now, the other part is this. We talk about the purpose. The reason the government started these, quite honestly, was to save time and money. They wanted to simplify their lives. They wanted to reduce the burden for themselves and for their vendors, their industrial base, in doing business with certain types of buys. Now, it's contained because there's limitations on what it can be, but essentially they made it easier for themselves. So as we move forward, reason number 14 is actually the other reason the government created these procedures, which happens to be one of my favorites. It's made to improve opportunities. And if you read it, what it essentially says, and this is in the FAR, that the government is basically using simplified acquisitions to improve opportunities for a variety of small business concerns. And so the language was written targeting small businesses for the government for these. So it's not just kind of a mental note somebody made, it's written down verbatim. That's the rules. And so the whole point is this. Whenever the U.S. government has a need to purchase supplies or services under what they call the simplified acquisition threshold. Now, up until FY15, it was anything under $2,500 or $3,000. They've increased it now, so it's now $3,500, but it's going to go up again. For DOD, one of the caveats they put in for the budget is that the micro purchase threshold for DOD will go to $5,000. Civilian agencies will still operate at $3,500. So think about this for a second. Based on what your company does, what you sell, do you have anything you can sell for less than $3,500? And if you say no, I'm going to tell you you're wrong, just so you know, because I'm going to make you think outside the box. I get software developers all the time like, I can't do anything for that amount. All right, and it takes me longer to turn my lights on than anything else. I said, well, don't think about selling a software development solution. Think about selling a gap analysis. Think about selling an assessment to the agency to look at one of the programs they're currently using. Does that get you in the door to work with them potentially at a lower level of risk for both you and them? It still gives you a chance to flaunt your stuff, show them what you know. So think outside the box. And when you start looking at these, it may not be your exact offering, but it could be a variation that leads to someone buying that offering. But the simplified acquisition threshold, so above micro purchase, the threshold is $3,500 to $150,000. Now, let me see if I can get your attention again. What can you sell for under $150,000? Okay, a lot more, right? Wait till I show you how much the government spends this way every year. It's a lot. Now, one of the things that comes into play, everyone's hopefully heard of the Rule of Two in federal contracting. The Rule of Two exists in federal contracting across the board, where the government essentially says if they can identify at least two small businesses who are competitive in terms of price, capability, quality, things like that, they're supposed to go to small business. In simplified acquisitions, everything in the threshold is considered reserved for small business. And what that means is the onus is on the government to say that we couldn't find two small businesses before they can go and give it to a large company or a mid-tier company. And so as opposed to justifying why they did find small businesses, they have to validate why they didn't. So these dollars, quite honestly, are waiting for you as a small business. You've just got to do a little work to make yourself known and visible to those buyers out there. All right, we can show you how to do that too. So the Rule 2 effectively says each acquisition is automatically reserved, and the only time they cannot, or they go away from that, is if the contracting officer determines there's not a reasonable expectation that they will find at least two small businesses. All right, so again, it's a lot of opportunity, a lot of money. So there's some articles out there that I've written on this one too. You'll see all these if you got the GovCon channel as well. Now, I just got done telling you about the threshold, $150,000. And there's a couple of you in here that just aren't excited yet. So there's like 150,000. I do that in my sleep. All right, good. I want to know who you are so I can work with you then. All right, but just in case $150,000 does not make you that excited, there are some exceptions. I mean, come on, it wouldn't be government contracting if there weren't exceptions, right? So, from an exception standpoint, we talk about, a man's got to know his limitations. It's the only time I'll ever invoke Dirty Harry, okay? But it's a good thing to know because here's what happens. In the FAR, the U.S. government has put some rules in place. Now, up until last fiscal year, this rule was something that had to be reauthorized every year. It was considered a test program. And this test program would allow the government, when they were buying certain commercial items. Now, anybody know the definition of a commercial item in the FAR? Commercial item basically is anything that's not proprietary, is the easiest way to describe it. So basically, the definition of a commercial item, I can drive the entire 6th Fleet through it. Now, the definition of a certain commercial item, I can drive half the 6th Fleet through it. It's not that much smaller. It basically gives the government the ability to pretty much buy anything they want under simplified acquisitions, with the caveat that now, by applying this rule, which is now permanent, they can now go to $6.5 million. So we went from 150,000 up to 6.5 million. And by the way, if it's an emergency, natural disaster, chemical, biological act, warfare, it goes to 13 million. All right, so think Katrina. They could spend 13 million in those instances. And they do. This rule they use all the time. About $5 billion a year on average of what the government spends via simplified acquisition is done using this rule, which means that they're spending above 150,000, basically between 150,000 and $6.5 billion. So I'm sorry, $1 million, not billion. That would be nice. So there are ways that the government uses this rule to their advantage to get around it. So that's one of the rules you'll want to know about. One of the other rules that you'll want to know about too, and if you understand the difference between a contract and a contract vehicle. Okay, contract is effectively kind of a one-shot deal. Purchase order, letter contract, go do this work, we'll pay you this money, we're all said and done. The only way they can change that is by modifying the contract. Whereas a contract vehicle is a mechanism that allows the government to place recurring orders against it. Could be a blanket purchase agreement, could be an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, could be a GWAC, government-wide acquisition contract like STARS 2 or SOUP or CIOSP3, which are IT-specific vehicles. On those contracts, the government can place orders for whatever the length of the contract is, a year, 5 years, 10 years, and rack up billions of dollars. Now, the reason I'm saying this to you is that the government can use contract vehicles like IDIQs and base them on simplified acquisitions. And they do. The Air Force, for example, has a contracting program, and it's actually a requirements program called SABRE. SABRE stands for Simplified Acquisition of Base Engineering Requirements. It's effectively a construction program at every Air Force base in the U.S. And what it does is they're all small business set-asides of various types, and they range from $1 million over 5 years to $40 million over 5 years. And what they do is they've got construction requirements. Let's say there's a new squadron moving to Bolling Air Force Base. They're going to have to build some new bachelor quarters, some other facilities. That'll be part of that SABRE for the next 5 years. But then if somebody crash lands a helicopter into the officer's mess, well, then they got to rebuild the officer's mess. That'd be a new project that they would add under the SABRE potentially. So if you're involved in construction or support services, take a look at SABREs. Every agency has something like it, Army, Navy, and so forth. But that's one of the ways, and like I said, it's not limited to 150,000 because 150,000 is not the contract total, that's the transaction total. So if the government issues you a purchase order right now for $150,000, you're done. If they issue you a multi-year contract using simplified acquisitions, they can issue you a $150,000 action every day for 5 years. And they do. Okay, blanket purchase agreements. Think of people that sell products. All right, you sell industrial cleaners to hospitals, VA. They want to buy, 20 pallets of it from you, but they don't want to stock it. So they'll place a blanket purchase agreement with you, and then you hold it and ship it to them at predetermined intervals. And then every time you send it out, you send them an invoice, you get paid. But you gave them a volume discount based on their buying $1 million of it from you over the course of a year or 2 years. So that's the ways that the government can take advantage of contract vehicles as they do these things. All right, now, reason number 12. Making these buys is easier. I stole this from a federal agency. Seriously. Okay, just kidding, they gave it to me. But this is the diagram of their procurement process when they are making buys using simplified acquisitions. There's a couple of things I'm going to show you about it. First thing is this: there are 3 decision points to be considered when they're doing these buys. The first one is this: is the buy above or below the micro purchase threshold? If the purchase is at or below the micro purchase threshold, we're done. They go directly to the right. They call the person in the office that's got the purchase card. Beverly, would you please buy this for us, please? Thank you very much. And game over, we're done. If it's above the micro purchase threshold, then they go to the next decision point, and that is the customer willing to write a sole source justification? All right, and if they are, they write it, they go through the whole process. But if they're not, they go to one more decision point. That decision point is very important for all of you to know too. And it is the buy above or below $25,000? Anybody know the significance of $25,000? It's tremendously important. $25,000 is what is known as the synopsis threshold. What that means is the government, if it's below $25,000, does not have to post it on FedBizOps. Which means if you want a shot at that, you better know that buyer. More importantly, they better know you. And so at this point, what you're doing is you're contacting people. You've got their name and their phone number. You reach out to them every once in a while. How's it going? Anything on your desk? Can I help you with that? I used to do this all the time in NIH. I would show up with a bunch of crawlers, 2 carafes of coffee, because this is when you can still walk on. Go to the contract shop, plunk everything down, talk to my friend Millicent Manning, who was the chief back then, say, what's up? And it's kind of hang out. Whoever had a small purchase on their desk, I'd sit there, get some pricing. All right, call back to the office, verify pricing, stick around, walk out with 3 or 4 orders and a belly full of crawlers. All right, but that's how we were doing it. You can still do that today, maybe minus the crawlers, but the whole point is every time you look on FedBizOps and you see a purchase on there that is for simplified acquisitions, one thing you're going to know is it's probably above $25,000. The other thing you're going to know is that buyer buys via simplified acquisitions. Put them in your Rolodex and start calling them. If they bought something that you sell, call them up. Got anything below 25K coming out? How do I get on your list for those? We'll be responsive, we'll be aggressive in our pricing, we'll do a good job. Anybody want to venture to guess how much money the U.S. government spends every year between $3,500 and $25,000? Here's a hint, starts with a B. Billions of dollars every year in that threshold. So if you've got something you can sell to the government for 25K or less, this is something you want to put into your process. This is your marketing model to start talking to these folks in the government. Here's the last thing that's going to happen I'm going to tell you about. So once they make that decision, if it's below $25,000, the rules are they call 3 small businesses and say, can I get a price? Can I get a price? Can I get a price? Get it back in, make an award. If it's above $25,000, they put it out in a synopsis or a combined synopsis solicitation. Ever see those? All right, you'll see this again in a second. If you ever see that phrase in FBO, combined synopsis solicitation, 9 out of 10, you're looking at a simplified acquisition. Okay? One of the little secrets I tell people about right there. So, once they do that, one of the things I want you to understand is the amount of time it takes the government to do these. When I used to work with the Air Force at Luke Air Force Base, 56th Contracting Squadron, I got a call from the commander who wanted a new laptop with extra video cards and memory and stuff like that. He'd call me on a Monday. They'd place the order with me on a Tuesday. I'd have it to them on a Friday. All right? On average, the government says it takes them 30 days to turn these around, which is a heck of a lot better than 6 to 12 to 18 months. So when they say streamlined purchasing, time is one of the big considerations. They are not trying to have these things sitting around. They will not have a long suspense date when you see them on Fed Biz Ops. It's a run and gun. You see it in there, you better put a bid in quick or you will get left out. All right, those are the opportunities. All right, reason number 11. Responding to the buys is easier too, and there's a reason for that. Anybody can tell me the functional difference between an RFQ and an RFP? If you've ever seen an RFQ before, sir. Okay. That's all right. No, you're good. Yep. So in federal contracting, all you're ever really going to see here from an R standpoint are RFIs, RFPs, and RFQs. You might see IFBs once in a while, especially in construction. RFQ is request for quotation. Now here's the major difference between the two. When you submit an RFP to the U.S. government, when you fill it out, put your tech prop, your cost prop, you go through sections L and M, get all the headaches associated with that, and then sign it and send it back in, you have made an offer to the U.S. government. You are now bound to that. Whatever the length of that proposal is, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, the government at any point in time during the validity of that proposal can place it as an order and can accept those terms. And you have to honor it. It's bilateral. An RFQ, request for quote, is not an offer to the government. When you send it to the government, it's a quote. And in order for them to buy from you, they have to come back with their own offer, usually in the form of a purchase order. And a purchase order is not a contract. It is an offer. You have 7 days to accept that purchase order. So if you accept it, sign it, send it back to them, or start doing a certain amount of work, once you get to a certain threshold, it's deemed accepted, and then it becomes a contract. Where this comes in handy is if you're dealing with people, let's say you've got a position you're trying to fill, and government drags its feet. It's been 6 months. The person you had that you had a contingency off to has moved on, got another job, and you find someone to replace because the government comes back, places the order, but this person is $20 more an hour. You can't accept that offer unless you want to lose money, right? So you have the right to turn the offer down, and no recourse on you. If your prices change from the time you place the quote, submit the quote to when you place the order, you don't have to accept it. And there's no negative recourse on you. So it's the difference between a contract and an offer, and a offer to the government and a quote. So there's legal difference between the two. Also, the level of effort in responding to an RFQ, significantly less. You're not proposing how you're going to provide a solution. You're giving them a quote, maybe a resume, capability statement, a little bit more information, but you are not doing a full-blown, management summary approach, technical response, these types of things. You're basically giving them a quote. So that's the main difference. That is how a majority of simplified acquisitions are procured, is via RFQ. And if you see in FBO this term come up, combined synopsis solicitation, here's what it means. Normally, when it's not a expedited buy, the U.S. government will issue a synopsis first that says, we intend to buy something in the next few days. And then they'll issue a solicitation and go from there. Combined synopsis solicitation, all in one fell swoop. Hey, we're going to buy something, and by the way, here it is. Give it to us now. All right, so they're trying to move it along. All right, show you something interesting here. A lot of people have this state of mind about simplified acquisitions. That's a very specific set of agencies that do this, and it's very small and not really relevant across the board. Last fiscal year, when the U.S. government spent $472 billion reported, there were 66 departments who contributed to that overall spend. That's top level, DOD, DHS, HHS, and so forth. I'm saying that for a reason. When the government spent money last year on simplified acquisitions, there were 61 organizations out of those 66. This is 61 departments at the top level. There were 153 contracting agencies. That's FEMA versus DHS, Army versus DOD, FDA versus HHS. There were 2,698 contracting offices. Contracting is the organization that issues and administers a contract, order, or agreement. Now here's the flip side. Last fiscal year, when the U.S. government spent money on simplified acquisitions, there were 79 funding departments. Anybody else notice that that number is bigger than the number of contracting departments? There are more customers out there with money to spend or getting requirements than there were to spend them. I'm introducing you to a little topic known as interagency contracting. All right, something you may not have seen before or not known you'd seen it before. Within those 79 departments, there were 275 funding agencies. Again, FEMA versus DHS, Coast Guard versus DHS, DISA versus DOD, one level down from department level. If it was FCC, it's still FCC. If it was, SEC, it's still SEC. That's the top level department for that organization. Check this number out. 10,131 funding offices. Now, who here is wondering why I'm showing you these big numbers or what it all means? What if I told you I need the street address for every single one of those numbers? I could give you a phone number for each one. Name people in each one. So think about it. So on the contracting side, I'm talking about buyers. Who am I talking about on the funding side? Customers, end users, program leads, the people that you want to know about. All right? Anybody ever heard the term DODAC before? DOD AAC? A DODAC number is a DOD acquisition activity code. If you've ever seen a contract from an agency, specifically DOD, like Fort Meade, MDA 904, if I see those numbers, I know that it's coming out of the Maryland Procurement Office. All right, the first 6 digits of a contract are the unique identifier of the contracting organization. You can use that, pull up a spreadsheet in FPDS-NG, and get their street address. You can also use that number to see everything they've ever bought. So if you've got a contracting office buying from you right now and you're curious what else they buy, you can go to FPDS-NG right now, pop that number in, bam, and you can sort it any way you want. This year, last 10 years, you now know everything that they buy and who they're buying from, how much they spent, how they competed, all the above. It's where you take inventory of your customers. Now I'm going to speed it up because I'm going to run out of time in a second, but I'll be around if anybody wants to talk afterwards. I'm going to get to the good part. All right, this is a breakdown of the spending the U.S. government did last fiscal year under simplified acquisitions. So $21 billion. Think about that. Most of that's between $3,500 and $150,000. There's only one more slide I'll show you after this to help give you a really good idea of what this equates to. If you look at what you see on the screen right now, I'm showing you the breakdown of spending by the U.S. government by the award type, whether it was a contract, an order, or a contract vehicle. If you look at these 2 things that I've highlighted right here, definitive contract and purchase order, They account for about 14 billion of that spend, roughly 70%. Those are both standalone contracts. They are not contract vehicles. You don't have to go get a GSA schedule first or get a BPA first. If the government wants to buy from you this way, they do their competition or sole source, it's up to them, and then they place the order. And the easiest way to tell if you ever work with the government under a established contract vehicle versus a standalone, if you've ever looked in USA Spending or FPDS, if you see one contract number, you're usually dealing with a standalone contract. If you see two contract numbers, that means the government placed an order against a master contract. So what you'll see is the unique contract ID, then you'll see a reference to what's called the IDV, the indefinite delivery vehicle. And that's how you tell the difference between orders placed this way. But bottom line here is 70% of what the government spends under simplified acquisitions, pretty much year over year, does not require your company to invest in a GSA schedule or some other contract vehicle. They're placing orders with standalone contracts. Now the last part I want to show you, just to give you an idea, right here. Last fiscal year, under simplified acquisitions, 9,525 companies split $18.3 billion, where each company won at least $250,000 via simplified acquisitions. So in other words, low man on the pole, low company on the pole, consolation prize was you only get $250,000. I know a lot of companies that would make very happy, trust me. Now, let me show you how this breaks down. 7,134 of those companies that were small businesses split just over $10 billion. Remember, every one of those companies had at least $250,000 in orders from the U.S. government. Could have been one, could have been 20, but it was a cumulative total of $250,000 just in simplified acquisitions. Remember, we're talking about a $21 billion bucket of money. That's it. Impacting 7,000 companies. That was an average of $1.4 million per company, by the way. 101 of those small businesses captured 10 million or more just in simplified acquisitions. 2,000 of them between $1 million and $10 million. And then 4,900, almost 5,000, 250,000 to $1 million. I call this slide not a bad way to make a living. And think about it. If you can capture that amount of money on something that will take a lot less time, a lot less effort to go after, you're probably making money. Your profit margins will be higher because the level of effort will be lower. The time you spend pursuing these will be less. And so this is one of the things I wanted to show. The very last thing I'm going to show you is this. And one of the reasons I really do this presentation is that over the last 9 years, when I started selling to the government this way, the U.S. government spent over $600 billion a year. I mean, we're down to under $500 billion right now. So there's been a downturn in overall spending. In FY09, when the U.S. government spent over $500 billion on overall purchasing, they spent about $13 billion on simplified acquisitions. Now, you already know the number for last year, right? It was higher. Here's what's happened. Anytime there's a CR, continuing resolution, kind of like what we're seeing right now, it's what Jeff and I were talking about. When the government can't make up its mind about how they're going to do the budget, so you go into this holding pattern where they get a certain portion of the budget, they can't do new programs, strictly O&M type activities. Whenever that happens in the government, simplified acquisition spending goes up. During the end of the fiscal year, simplified acquisition spending goes up. So our perfect storm is that we are just getting a budget passed, all right, and it's basically fourth quarter. So simplified acquisitions usually increase anyway this time of year, but the government's going to have basically 1 quarter to spend all of its money for the year. So the thing I was going to show you was this. The spending has been going up year over year for the last 8 fiscal years. When you average this out, it's been just over $1 billion increase every year in simplified acquisitions. So they're doing this, but the overall spend in government is doing this. The government's spending less overall, but spending more in simplified acquisitions. And there's a lot of reasons for it. When I talk to different acquisition professionals, and they talk about the ease of use, they talk about education of some of the contracting staff, things of that nature, because we get a lot of new blood. So there's lots and lots of reasons, but the point is, it's happening. And these buys are reserved for small business concerns. So they're creating a lot more opportunities for us, and the number one challenge for small businesses in getting more than 58% of these is that nobody knows we're here. It's marketing. And not marketing like go buy the sign on the side of a bus, stuff like that. Anybody know how many feds are on LinkedIn? 1.6 million. You know how inexpensive it is to buy an ad and target an ad on LinkedIn? You can specify it by geography, by organization, like DISA. You can specify it by title. Spend $50, $100, and push marketing out there to let people know you're there. Have your thought leadership going. How many of you guys write blogs or curate articles coming from other sources that are considered reputable? Any little thing like that that you see, that you do, will raise your profile. The main thing you have to do is these buyers, if you guys have ever been to Fed Biz Ops, honestly, go to FBO later today, and there's a thing where you can put in a keyword. Type in quotes, simplified acquisition. Okay, 2 words, in quotes, watch what comes up. One of the slides I've got in here, I did it the other day, 631 current actions in there. It's only about 20 down from what it was this time last year. Okay, the government is buying this way all the time, and they buy products and services. 61 different departments buy products and services. What does your company sell? Okay, they buy that. What does your company sell? They buy that. Okay. Absolutely buy that, ma'am. Oh, absolutely, yes. CMS and HHS all over it. My point is, there is nothing, all right? Everybody know about NAICS codes and PSC codes? All right, forget everything you know about NAICS codes. Okay, because I'm going to tell you, whatever you know about them, it's probably wrong. Hate to be that blunt about it, that candid about it. NAICS codes, how many of you use NAICS codes to search in Fed Biz Ops? A lot of stuff that doesn't pertain to you. You know why? Because a NAICS code is not telling you what the government's buying. It's telling you how they're going to use what they're buying. There's another code called a product service code, which is also on the FBO, and it's in your SAM profile. That's the indicator of the primary product or service the government's buying. So if your company has orders from the government right now, or you got a competitor that does, go look at their orders in USA Spending or FPDS and look at the PSC code. All right, when I started in federal contracting in 1988, let me just offer this up, there was no such thing as a NAICS code. Okay? NAICS codes didn't come around until 1998. PSC codes, however, have been here with me since day one. And so you need to learn a balance. You'll see articles on my GovCon channel site, one called A Quick Guide to Product Service Codes. Read that, please. It will make your life easier. Sure. It's on the GovCon channel, GOVCON channel.com. It's our news website. The article, it's on the left side under featured articles, called A Quick Guide to Product and Service Codes. And it will connect you to a bunch of other articles that are related too. But I literally just had a meeting with GAO about a month and a half ago on the topic of NAICS codes and PSC codes, because there's a congressional inquiry into code shopping within the contracting offices. And we basically said, you know what, if it's happening, it's probably that big. The bigger issue is nobody knows how to use them, government or industry. All right, so the NAICS code, because everything you hear when you talk to the government is, got to get your NAICS code straight. Make sure you got the right NAICS codes. If I told you that under 4 NAICS codes, that represent the heart and soul of information technology companies. 541-511, 541-512, 541-513, and 541-519. So if you're in health IT, you know those NAICS codes. By the end of third quarter last fiscal year, the U.S. government has obligated $30 billion under those 4 NAICS codes. The U.S. government references 1,200 NAICS codes a year, just to give you an idea. But they did $30 billion under those 4, and under those 4 were 542 different product service codes. Now, product service codes come in 3 flavors. 4 numbers, which is products, 2 letters and 2 numbers, which is R&D, 1 letter, 3 numbers, which is services. Under those 542, only 30 of those codes were for IT products and services. Everything else was translation, HR consulting, cleaning services, courier service, construction, and a variety of products. And that's because if I'm running a data center for the U.S. government and I've got 2 employees who are squabbling all the time, I want to bring in HR consulting mediation. Well, my project is based on a data center, 541-519, IT facilities, but I'm buying HR services under it to support that program. So that's what I wanted to leave you with. I will make sure you guys get the slides, and I will also, Charles, I'm going to send you a link to this online so that they can all go watch the full thing online as well. Perfect. Yep, and then I'm going to be around. If you'd like to have any conversation or questions about this, feel free to stop me. I'll be around. Folks, thank you very much. Sorry we ran out of time today.